The frequency table shows the number of hours that students in your grade spent on homework last week. Display the data in a histogram. Describe the shape of the distribution. First draw and label the axes with the number of hours and the frequency. Then draw a bar to represent the frequency of each interval. 0 to 1 hours has a frequency of 5. 2 to 3 hours has a frequency of 25. 4 to 5 hours has a frequency of 20. 6 to 7 hours has a frequency of 18. 8 to 9 hours has a frequency of 12. 10 to 11 hours has a frequency of 6. And 12 to 13 hours has a frequency of 2. Notice that the tail of the graph extends to the right and most of the data are on the left, so the distribution is skewed right. A grocery store cashes checks for customers. The amounts cashed for 1 week are shown in the table. Part A. Display the data in a histogram using 6 intervals, beginning with 1 to 25. First make a frequency table using the described intervals. $1 to $25 occurs 5 times, so the frequency is 5. $26 to $50 occurs 10 times, so the frequency is 10. $51 to $75 occurs 9 times, so the frequency is 9. $76 to $100 occurs 2 times, so the frequency is 2. $101 to $125 occurs 1 time, so the frequency is 1. And $126 to $150 occurs 1 time, so the frequency is 1. Next, use the frequency table to make a histogram. Draw a bar to represent the frequency for each interval. 1 to 25 has a frequency of 5. 26 to 50 has a frequency of 10. 51 to 75 has a frequency of 9. 76 to 100 has a frequency of 2. 101 to 125 has a frequency of 1. And 126 to 150 has a frequency of 1. Part B. Which measures of center and variation best represent the data? The distribution is skewed right, so use the median to describe the center and the 5-number summary to describe the variation. Part C. The grocery store charges a fee for cashing checks that are greater than $75. How would you interpret these results? Based on the results, most customers do not want to pay the fee. The double histogram shows the distributions of the numbers of minutes of exercise done by a group of female students and a group of male students during one day. Compare the distributions using their shapes and appropriate measures of center and variation. First, consider the group of female students. Notice that the data on the right of the distribution are approximately a mirror image of the data on the left of the distribution. so the distribution is symmetric. So the mean and standard deviation best represent the distribution for female students. Next, consider the group of male students. Notice that most of the data are on the right and the tail of the graph extends to the left, so the distribution is skewed left. So the median and 5-number summary best represent the distribution for male students. Note that the mean of the female dataset is probably in the 31 to 45 interval, while the median of the male dataset is probably in the 46 to 60 interval. So a male student is more likely to spend more time exercising than a female student. The data for the female students is more variable than the data for the male students. This means that the time spent exercising tends to differ more from one female student to the next. The table shows the results of a survey that asked men and women how many pairs of socks they own. Part A. Make a double box and whisker plot that represents the data. Describe the shape of each distribution. First, draw a number line. Begin by making a box and whisker plot for men. Notice that the first quartile is 8. Plot a point at 8. Then notice that the third quartile is 25. Plot a point at 25. Then use the first quartile and the third quartile to draw a box. Next, notice that the median is 15, so plot a point at 15 and draw a line through the median. Then notice that the minimum value is 4, so plot a point at 4. Next, notice that the maximum value is 30, so plot a point at 30. Then draw whiskers extending to the minimum and maximum values. Next, make a box and whisker plot for women. Notice that the first quartile is 12, so plot a point at 12. Then notice that the third quartile is 23, so plot a point at 23. Then use the first quartile and the third quartile to draw a box. Next, notice that the median is 15, so plot a point at 15 and draw a line through the median. Next, notice that the minimum value is 8, so plot a point at 8. Then notice that the maximum value is 35, so plot a point at 35. Then draw whiskers extending to the minimum and maximum value. Using the box and whisker plots, you can see that the distribution for men is symmetric and the distribution for women is skewed right. Part B. Compare the number of pairs of socks owned by men to the number of pairs of socks owned by women. Notice that the centers and spreads of the two data sets are similar to each other. The median for women is just one less than the mean for men, and there is slightly more variability in the number of pairs of socks owned by men. Part C. About how many of the men surveyed would you expect to own between 6 and 26 pairs of socks? Assuming the symmetric distribution is bell-shaped, you know that about 68% of the data lie within one standard deviation of the mean. Because the mean is 16 and the standard deviation is 10, the interval from 6 to 26 represents about 68% of the data, so you would expect about 68 hundredths times 30, or approximately 20 of the men surveyed, to own between 6 and 26 pairs of socks. The pairs